Uh, Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and thanks to the Streaming East Summit for hosting me today. I also I'm going to find the best way to use this podium because I feel like I'm just surrounded by furniture. So walking from left to right, it's like going through someone's dining room. So today I'm going to speak about what Nielsen's calling the Digital Crossroads. And I'm sure since you've all been to these types of conferences before, you've probably seen lots of trends discussions, lots of discussions about, here rapid changes that are happening in the industry. And so what I'm hoping is that we can talk a little bit about trends which will be relevant for today, relevant for now, and that I can tie it together with some of the work that Nielsen is doing on measurement innovation. So specific new tools that Nielsen is developing to help solve for these trends and to address the needs of our clients, your clients, everybody out of the industry. And then finally, to just have a few points, a few thoughts on what this is doing to the industry more broadly. So again, those 3 points on the agenda, broad trends, trying to think about what's happened in the last 5 years, what's relevant today, what Nielsen's doing to innovate. A lot of people don't think of Nielsen as a technology company or a digital company, but in the last 5 years, I think there's a lot of change that's happened at Nielsen, which has made and forced us to be much more tech savvy, to be much more digitally aware about what we're doing, some of the solutions we've developed there, and then finally, where we think that digital television and digital video more broadly is heading in the next years. So let me jump right in. We'll also have Q&A at the end, so you can save your questions to the end. You can yell them out or use the mic up there. So let me first talk about the last 5 years. So the last 5 years, way back when, the world was a lot simpler. So 50 years ago, or even longer, when Nielsen started measuring television, it was very simple. You had a few broadcast networks, and then you measured the United States. Everybody had a TV. Everybody did it. The user experience out there was very consistent, right? You only had a few channels. And in the last 5 years, the amount of device proliferation we've seen has completely changed that. So when we play that tape forward from like 50 years ago, we started with a few broadcast networks. Then we had color TV, and then we had cable television, and we had VCRs, and we had a few other things that came into play that happened over the course of a very long time. And now in the last 5 years, we've had a lot of different changes. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to try to cover some of the most relevant trends that have affected us from 2009 until today. So if you imagine going back in time 5 years, it doesn't seem like very long, but a lot of user behavior, a lot of consumer behavior has changed, which has led to the place we are today. And so, I'm first going to talk about things which are on the wane. So what has stopped happening? And some of these are going to be not that surprising. Then I'm going to switch over to what's really started happening. What's the big change? What's come up? So first, young people no longer use physical media. That's not surprising. Everybody is streaming. Second, when we actually take a look at video consumption on computers, it's grown almost doubling when you take a look at all different forms of video consumption. So this was even downloaded video, but on computers it's gone up by 162%. VCRs disappeared. That's not shocking, but it actually was still being used 5 years ago. The VCR was still being used, and now it's completely gone. And the DVR has basically killed that completely. And then finally, despite all of this happening, we are seeing decreases in the amount of live television viewing. The amount of total video consumption is actually going up. And so this is an interesting point, which is that a lot of people talk about these days as being the golden age of television. And there's a lot of truth to that because despite the fact that people might not be tuning in during prime time, people are watching more television today than they ever have in the past. It's just that it's being viewed on many different places, many different channels, and that's a really good thing for us. That's a really good thing for a lot of people here because it means that there's choice and there's increased consumption, and everyone is going on to video, and other forms of media are actually the ones that are suffering. So people aren't reading magazines anymore, for example. That's one of the things that we see. So what's rising? So not surprising, Mobile is the biggest change that we see right now. And it's interesting that when we take a look at the number of smartphones that were out in the industry 5 years ago, so 2009, 2 years after the iPhone was launched, the number of devices has increased 10x over the last 5 years. But the amount of video that's available on that has also increased, probably just as much in terms of available. So the opportunities for users, for consumers to view video on mobile devices has exploded. And this is a trend that's really only been in the last 5 years. This is also a spectacular one, which is that tablet computers, so iPads, Android tablets, Surfaces, other things like that, in only the past 4 years, you think about when the iPad was launched, there are now 40 million US homes that have at least one tablet. And so there's many multiple tablet homes even. But in only 4 years, we've seen a dramatic increase. And so when you compare this to other types of media consumption devices, TVs, even VCRs and DVRs, this is explosive growth. We're talking about 40 million households. That's almost 40% of the total US population has access to a tablet in their home, which is pretty spectacular. This is another big trend, and this is actually one which is just starting, is that smart televisions. So 25% of US TV homes now have access to internet video directly on their TV. And so I use the term smart TV a little bit loosely. It also includes any TV which has an over-the-top device attached, so a Roku box, an Apple TV, a smart TV that actually has the built-in software. But a full quarter of US TV homes now have access to internet media right on their TVs, right? And this has gone from virtually nothing only 5 years ago to being a quarter of the entire population. And that is also another huge change which happened in the last 5 years. And this is an odd one. I asked the team to put together something, but kids 2 to 11 have doubled their time-shifted viewing. And when I really thought about it, so well, this is actually really important, which is that it indicates that technology has now become more accessible, where in the past, it would be early adopters. So it would be like young people or people who work in the tech industry would be, oh yeah, I can hook up all this stuff to my TV. Like I can figure it out. I'll download some cool software. But now everybody, so teens, kids, even older audiences are all able to use the types of technologies which previously were considered only for early adopters. So time shifting is one of these first few ones where kids can now use DVRs without any problem, which is actually a pretty significant change in behavior. And then finally, when we take a look at these young audiences, when we take a look at teens, this is not a surprising one, but this is where the broader demographic changes. As these populations get older, as they start to be able to purchase services and to buy homes and things like this over time, young people are not using live TV anymore, and so we've seen the most dramatic shift in live TV viewing within 12 to 17-year-olds. So in the next few slides, then I'll get into actually what Nielsen's doing about it. A few observations as to what is driving some of this behavior. So the first is that it's driven by not just technology, but by specific kinds of devices that give people choice. And so the growth rates that we see on smartphones, tablets, and smart TVs are pretty spectacular. This is just year on year. Take a look at 12, 13, 14. But each one of these devices can be used to consume any kind of media. So a television in the old days is a single-purpose device, and everyone 5 years ago was talking about, oh yeah, we're going to be in the age of multi-purpose devices, right? Where you're going to be able to use one device to be able to consume everything. Now, that was very future-looking 5 years ago because there wasn't availability. Today, it's a reality where you now have a significant proportion of the US population having access to these multi-purpose devices. Each one of those smartphones, tablets, and smart TVs can be used to access video, audio, internet content, any kind of content which is available, and not just traditional TV, all forms of streaming media as well. And so, we don't anticipate these trends to let up anytime. In fact, we just expect saturation, where it becomes the norm that households have all these different devices, especially as cost goes down. And then when we take a look at TV-like content specifically, so just the large broadcast media and that TV content, and take a look at how people's viewing has changed there, despite the fact that live TV is being eaten into, it still remains a pretty substantial portion of viewing. But we're seeing it all through time shifting, so DVR playback, and we're also seeing it through different streaming services. But interestingly, it's still not a really large chunk of the viewing. It really has to do with the fact that the TV viewing that we have is coming from such a large base. When you take a look at the amount of viewing that you have here, particularly in prime time, the vast majority of US households still watch television of some sort during prime time. And it's actually the exception that people are using the advanced services during that period of time. A lot of the growth in overall consumption of video is coming at the edges, where people are finding ways, new occasions to be able to view video, not just during prime time. And this is telling where, despite the fact that there is this substantial growth, the amount of viewership we see on traditional platforms remains strong. It's just shifting a little bit. The last point that I wanted to highlight, and this is a bit of an eye chart, but let me walk you through it, is that it's the heavy users that are driving the shift to new devices. And it's not really that shocking, but the degree to which individuals are actually driving the metrics, as opposed to broad, everybody's watching a few minutes of Netflix, everybody's watching a few minutes of Hulu, where it's very specific audiences that are making the choice and leaping into it, is very telling. So each row represents heavy users of these 4 different devices, and the icons represent televisions, computers, game consoles, and then all forms of streaming media devices connected to TVs. So the way to think about the diagonal is how much is a heavy user of that device driving usage on that device. And I think the bottom row is actually the most telling, which is that if you're a heavy user of Netflix or a heavy user of Hulu or any one of those streaming devices, the majority of your viewing is coming from that. And that's what's contributing to the overall shift in time spent. And what it means is that if you just follow the trends on those users, it'll tell you how the video shift the shift in consumption will happen. And that's actually a very important point, because it's not that everybody is starting to use it a little bit that's driving the 3% or the 2%. It's that there's 2% of the audience that's using it exclusively. And so watching those metrics is what's going to drive the shift in behavior. It's also why Nielsen is taking a very close look at it, because it means that we have to have a solution to measure those users, because it's not going to be acceptable to provide a measurement service which doesn't have those users included as they grow, as those populations grow larger and larger. So those are the trends. And so I hope that there's some new nuggets of information in there. I hope there's some new insights that you can take away from that. So into the next section, how is Nielsen innovating to measure today's consumer? And I'm going to talk about 2 big programs that Nielsen is undertaking today to expand our measurement and to build new capabilities. And those are what we internally call our cross-platform measurement program, and then our mobile measurement program, so how we're measuring those devices. I also want to try to give you an appreciation for the complexity of the problem and why solving for cross-platform and solving for metrics on multiple devices is actually a pretty hard problem, to give you an idea of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Without having you actually come into my office, I have to deal with what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So the environment, we already talked about this. I think this is actually a very cool chart, because it actually lays out all the changes that have happened and then when they happened. And so you see the blue, that's 50 years of change, right? You can barely read it, but it's black and white TV, satellite, cable, ad-supported cable nets, digital and internet. And then suddenly, in the first part of the millennium, you had an expansion of different devices and a lot of different approaches to view video and consume other media. And then only in the last few years, this is what we're talking about, which is you have even more proliferation where the devices are just exploding. Every day there's a new device, a new service, right? You know, Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, whatever Apple's going to release, you know, hopefully next month, right? What's going to happen there? All of those changes need to be addressed. And so how is Nielsen thinking about it? So if I step back first and think about broadly what Nielsen is trying to answer for our clients, we focus on 3 questions. And a lot of the attention on Nielsen kind of falls into that first blue circle, the reach question, which is just the core measurement of how many people saw something. And that something could be an ad, it could be a piece of content, it could be a website. In some countries, it's magazines and newspapers and things like that. But we have a broader framework that we use, which is called the 3 Rs, and it covers reach, resonance, and reaction. And so the questions we're trying to answer for all of our clients are how many people were reached, so what was your exposure, what was the resonance, how did it affect their behavior, how did it affect their attitudes? So did they remember the ad, for example? Did they have a certain takeaway from the video that they saw or the ad that they saw? And then the reaction, which is what did they actually do? What's the actual effect on behavior? So did they go and buy something? And so this is naturally very well suited to advertisers, but it also is well suited to content providers and other companies that are trying to play within the value chain. We also take these 3 questions, the 3R framework, and we apply it to all types of media, video, audio, and text. We apply it across all platforms. And so this is across computers, televisions, mobile devices, paid, owned, and earned media, and we also do it with a global footprint. And this helps to answer our clients, the industry's biggest questions about marketing, about media, and about advertising effectiveness. And so I spend almost all of my time on the reach question, trying to understand how audiences are exposed to ads and content on digital devices, how that compares to television, and how it compares to other platforms. And so, for cross-platform measurement, why is it important, and why is it hard? So, there's a lot of people in the industry, they think, oh, you can just cobble together metrics from many different places and you'll get a view, right? You just take a TV number and take a computer number, take a mobile number and add it together and you'll get a view, cross-platform view. It's that simple. But it's actually not that easy. It's actually hard to provide a perspective which is actionable and that can balance the interests between publishers and advertisers and agencies and tech companies and others. And that's where Nielsen really adds value in this case. And in this next section, I want to try to give you an appreciation for all the different layers of cross-platform that we need to address, all the different dimensions that need to be properly addressed and balanced. And so, what are those? So the first is the usage type. And so for all of our clients, and particularly the television clients, they're interested in how usage differs between on-demand and live. Live is always going to be an important kind of media to measure, and it has an urgency, it has a need to be measured. Time-shifted or on-demand media is also very important. And it's the vast majority of what our digital clients are trying to measure. On top of that, we also have to determine how cross-platform viewership is being consumed by device. And so this is usually where people think of cross-platform. You can just take numbers from a computer, a TV, a mobile device, a tablet, add it together, and you're fine. But the nuance to this is that a cross-platform number is only relevant if you can actually make decisions and make actions based on those numbers. If you don't have a common basis, you can't decide whether it would be a better idea to distribute on one platform versus another. You're not able to really say whether or not people are consuming in a similar way or have an apples-to-apples comparison of how consumption is happening between different devices. And so those are nuances which are often lost when speaking about this at a very high level. The next is delivery type. So the number of dimensions are already becoming really complicated, but on many of these devices, TVs, smartphones, tablets, you have a multitude of choices as how the media is consumed. So you don't just have a single screen you turn on and video shows up. You can access it through a website, an app, a proprietary service which is built into the device, and then you still have traditional television broadcast. And those need to be measured. And then finally, and actually this might be the most important level of all, it's by the ad model. And this dictates what types of decisions need to be made and how the metrics need to be presented, which is between a dynamic, digitally inserted ad model versus a linear broadcast model of distribution. The numbers that you need to be able to operate those businesses and to make decisions between those different ad models are very different. And so trying to solve for all these different facets, so having measurement on all the devices, having support for all the different distribution and delivery types by the different ad models, and also for different usage cases, is pretty complicated. And so that's why, Nielsen, we spend a lot of time trying to solve this. It's why we've invested to be able to build solutions, and it's why a lot of the industry still relies on us to be able to provide these metrics. When we started this journey to try to expand our measurement services, we identified a number of important things which we needed to make sure they're ingredients that needed to be addressed as part of the measurement system. And those 6 important things that we've identified is, first, you need to have extremely large sample sizes and comprehensive digital coverage. And so I primarily work on our digital products, so products like online campaign ratings and digital program ratings, which rely on Facebook's data set. And having access to this data is really what allows us to be able to provide many of the digital services that we're developing right now, as well as other census-style data sets like data from Experian and others. These data sets represent some of the largest quote-unquote panels in the world. So Facebook has an increasingly has a growing user base. In the US, they have about 180 million people using the service. Around the world, they have 1.2 billion users, and it continues to grow. And they are one of the richest sources of demographic information on the planet. The second is single source, comprehensive and reliable panels. And with the proliferation of data sources, I'm going to avoid using the term big data, everybody can claim to have rich information about users. Everybody can create a metric. Everybody has the capabilities, technology, and the assets to be able to create a service. The need, once you have all these different data sets out there, is to have reference information. And this is where Nielsen really adds a lot of value and where we help a lot of these companies, a lot of the internet companies, a lot of the digital companies with their data sets, because they have information which is inferred, or they don't explicitly go out and try to recruit this information. It comes as a byproduct of their service. We can help to validate whether or not it's any good. And the only tried and tested way of doing this is to use panel or survey-based methodologies to really understand, is that person who's in front of the computer truly what the service provider or the digital marketing company think they are? The third is that there needs to be true comparability to television. Everybody is talking about trying to compare themselves to TV, to be able to take dollars from TV, to do all sorts of things to TV. But to even start the conversation about the comparability, the metrics have to be based with the same kind of rules, the same kind of rigor, the same kind of concepts. Next is that mobile has to be included. And so this was a question mark even a few years ago. Now it must be included because of consumer trends. We need to address the question of viewability. So are ads in particular truly viewable? And then finally, accreditation. To the point that I was making earlier, with the proliferation of data providers and data sources, anybody can come up with a measurement system. And so the need for validation is even more important for bodies like the MRC and for the IAB to be able to weigh in and say, oh yes, these providers provide relevant, accurate data, and you can trust them. And so that trust is actually really important these days because it's very hard to tell who has the right answer, or if there even exists one. So let me now go into the specific technology. And so the next part of the presentation is really focused on the technology that Nielsen's developed to address mobile and new platforms. And so the next few slides are going to focus on mobile and on mobile apps, but the concepts apply to new platforms just the same, because again, a mobile device is just a piece of, it's a computer with a touchscreen and glass, and it runs software which can give you video. All the new devices are basically the same thing. They're just either bigger or mounted on your wall or projected and things like that. So the first is that Nielsen has invested a lot of time and effort to develop a single client implementation, so an SDK, which our clients can implement. So for mobile, we have an iOS, we have an Android version. We're working on other platforms. And it does everything we need to be able to, everything that the client needs to be able to take a look at what's being viewed on the app, to be able to translate that into requests that are sent to our servers, and for us to be able to collect and interpret it. It also includes all of the necessary software to protect, not to protect, but to address privacy needs and to be able to address consumer choice. And so many call it a software meter, but in reality it's just software which runs in a video app that can collect information about what's being shown and to be able to translate that into signals that we can then process. To be able to identify the video content or the ads, we have a single encoding and tagging process, which works across all different platforms. And so, as an example, all the watermarks and codes which exist on television can be translated into these digital watermarks, which can then be measured using these types of implementations. We also have digital-only approaches, which use tags to be able to identify what video or what ad is being shown. And so it's a single, consistent approach which works across all of the different products as well as the different media types. We then enable that measurement with big data. And it's the marketing people that put big data in there, not me. We're able to associate the viewership to Facebook users as well as to experience databases to be able to provide census level measurement of who is actually exposed to those ads or to that content. And then finally, we have a strict focus on making sure we have gold standard processes to work lockstep with the MRC to make sure that these systems adhere to all the necessary audit requirements as well as to all the necessary privacy requirements. And as a result, for either native digital content, which is the red, or television or originated content, which is the blue, we can then take all that content and all those ads put it through this process, and generate metrics which are exclusively for digital, exclusively for television, or cross-platform. And this is actually to that point a few slides back about the ad model. When we talk about television, we're actually talking about linear distribution modes. And digital, we're talking about dynamic distribution. The actual device type and the app that you use and the technology doesn't matter these days, but the metrics need to pass through this process. The metrics need to be calculated this way to be able to generate the numbers. And so how are we trying to expand our footprint? And so even just a couple of years ago, Nielsen was isolated primarily to just the kind of the top right 6 boxes. So we had a really, really great solution for linear ad models, for programs and ads. It worked great on TV sets, anything was connected to the TV set, and then to computers. What we've been working on in the past couple of years, and really launching this year, with major product launches, are expanding the linear ads, the linear measurement, to tablets and smartphones. So if you use the Xfinity app, the Verizon Fios app, other MVPD apps, or even live streaming apps by broadcasters themselves, those metrics will start to be rolled into the TV ratings. And so that viewership will start getting rolled in. The really exciting stuff is happening on the digital dynamic side, where we've announced partnerships with many internet companies. Facebook is obvious. Google we've announced with a bunch of the video ad platforms and many ad servers to enable and to embed our data into their workflows and to make that data available to their clients. And so we launched OCR in 2011, but the rest of this map is going to be completed this year. So digital program ratings, which is for content on computers, and expanding measurement of those digital platforms to tablets, smartphones, and connected devices over the next 12 months. So what is this? What does getting to this kind of mountain summit or Holy Grail give us? It helps. What we see is that it helps all of our clients. It helps everybody in the industry if we have consistent, comparable metrics which are available. And so, starting with, the broadcasters, the core television clients, they start to get C3 ratings, C7 ratings available on mobile devices. Broadcasters can now flexibly choose between the C3 model, the linear model, and the dynamic model. Digital companies, digital publishers can get a complete view that's comparable to television metrics to compete for video ad dollars. And so all of the services which are at the bottom of that chart provide GRP and comparable video metrics to all the digital publishers so they can be compared vis-a-vis television. And digital also benefits from the same quality and rigor of measurement as traditional TV. And then for advertisers and for agencies, they can feel more confident that they can make complete and informed choices between all the different choices which are out there. So imagine if you're trying to buy in this ecosystem today. The number of choices is just unbelievable. With these metrics, we can help to peel back all the layers and to be able to help make better decisions. Right. So where do we see digital heading in the next 5 years? And so I'm going to try to close up in the next few minutes so that I can leave some time for questions. The first thing is, why is measuring across platform important? Why is it important to be able to measure mobile? The first is that video consumption on smartphones and tablets is only going to continue to grow. So this is kind of self-evident. But for the buyers of advertising, all of the kind of siloed nature of media buying that happens today in media planning, those silos are going to start really breaking down over the next 3 years. And so we've surveyed agencies and media buyers. Others have surveyed agencies and media buyers and really asked the question, well, when are you going to start really creating cross-platform campaigns to really start buying holistically instead of giving a budget off to the TV guy and giving a budget off to the digital guy? And 50% of ad buyers have said that in the next 3 years they're going to really start consolidating the way that they do their ad buying, and that they're going to take holistic views about cross-platform spend, and that's going to be I think a huge boon for anybody who has digital platforms that have streaming assets. It also means that there's going to be a whole lot more of a need to compare television to digital. And then finally, we also anticipate that the need for technology solutions like Nielsen's mobile SDKs and mobile measurement are going to be critically important. And so what we see is that Nielsen is going to shift from its kind of traditional business focusing on developing panels and meters to creating more software, to be creating more digital services, which are reliant on software packages like our SDKs, and having this type of technology embedded into the ecosystem. And so we've started with mobile. We anticipate that next year we're really going to be focusing on those over-the-top devices. And so figure out how do we solve the same problem on an Apple TV or a Samsung Smart TV or an LG Smart TV that we've been solving on mobile devices. And that's only going to make the metrics that we generate richer. That's only going to be able to make the types of data available to the industry richer, and to be able to help both media companies as well as advertisers and buyers monetize and to spend effectively on video. So that's it. Thank you everybody for entertaining me. I hope that you've been entertained somewhat. And I'll open up for questions.
With regard to the new media or the new ways that you'll be monitoring the multi-platform, how are you handling your panel selection? Because that's always been a very key point for the TV measurement, and across the devices that has to be changing. Yeah.
So the panel selection for television has historically been based on TV households. And so a couple of years ago, we did change the definition of the TV household to include broadband-only homes, so homes that only had access to video through an internet connection. And that basically increased the candidate population to well into the high 90s again. Right now, we are closely monitoring whether there's any other shifts and whether we need to further expand that definition. I can share two thoughts. The first is that for our digital products like OCR and for digital program ratings, in anticipation of that, those products are based on a total population size universe. And so we try to ensure representativeness against the total population. For television, with the mobile programs, we are taking a look at the impact of the changing definitions. The impact of including mobile-only homes. But right now, the number of homes that are mobile-only but that don't have access to TV is so small that it doesn't have an appreciable change. But if that were to shift, then we would have to reevaluate. Yep.
How do you measure the success of a second screen app? I mean, there must be more to it than just sheer numbers, because it's a tiny fraction of TV viewership using that second screen app. You don't want to say 2% of my users, use the app. My viewers use the app. So how do you measure the success
So the question was, how do we measure the success of a second screen app? So I guess it depends on, for the app developer, what's the definition of success, because it varies. The type of work we've been doing right now is kind of focused on social engagement with television. So we've built separate services, which are not up here, called Twitter TV ratings, which are focused on determining what is the actual impact of somebody engaging with video content on their second screen. And so it's one use case, but it does represent some of the ways that Nielsen is thinking about those second screen apps. In that case, it doesn't focus on the fact that the user happens to be, tweeting that they're watching, Homeland or whatever. The impact that we're trying to measure is what is the ancillary impact? So when they tweet, how many people are actually exposed? And so for that particular example, when one person tweets, 30 people can be exposed. And when 50,000 people tweet, millions of people can be exposed. And that type of exposure, that's an example within the Twitter TV ratings, what we're trying to measure. For the app itself, we have all of the kind of the standard ad-related measurement. And so if they're serving banners to try to monetize, we have solutions for that. Yep.
Just bouncing on what you just said, we know that all those second screen apps are not effective the same way because TV programs are not engaging people on second screen the same way. Reality TV is very engaging for people, but drama could be very still. Though people may consume those videos on second screen platform, so is this the only way that you're going to measure the success with the social engagement, or there's other metrics that you might use?
I mean, so the question is, are there other metrics that we're looking to produce for second screen apps? At this time, I can't comment on the longer term roadmap of some of the social apps or the social measurement we do. It's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. But there's two places where we're trying to continue having comprehensive measurement for apps. The first is just with broad app analytics, and so we have just a measurement across the industry is what does app consumption look like? How much time are you spending on one app versus another, or one service versus another? So there's that. And then the second is again, whenever one monetizes inside an app, make sure that we have measurement of those events and those ads which are exposed. Yep.
What are you doing for on-demand measurement, whether it be by title, by service, by provider, by all the variables?
So the question is, what are we doing about on-demand measurement? So I'm assuming you're talking about on-demand that's via MVPDs?
Typically, any on-demand programming, whether it's HBO or the movie of the week.
So that's a much larger conversation. So I'm not going to be able to address all of it, and I could certainly follow up with you for additional questions. We are continuing to expand our footprint of traditional television measurement, and so there's a whole series of different types of VOD measurement, which the core Nielsen team is working on. The two biggest areas we're focusing on right now is deep library streaming. So how do we incorporate that, or at least provide metrics which are relevant for that deep library if you're watching something from months ago, instead of just 7-day, 30-day kind of numbers. The second is, as you may have seen announced, that we're starting to do some work with Black Arrow to try to solve the problem of measuring digital ad insertion on television, which is very relevant for VOD. And that's an area which I'm happy to speak to you offline about.
Just curious if you can share a little bit of the discussions you've had with encoding vendors. I mean, it sounds like you'll need to have ID3 tags added for the SDK to register with. Are all these discussions being held with the encoding vendors, or how is that happening?
So the question is, can I comment at all about encoding vendors as it relates to some of the watermarking we're doing for the mobile programs? And so it looks like we have, an experienced person in the in the audience. I can't comment specifically about our relationships with particular vendors, but what I could say is that we're making the encoding software available very broadly, and it's a software-based solution, so that it's actually been relatively easy for our vendors to implement, because it's just an application software which they can run, they can create jobs around it, and they can operate in the cloud or use a desktop software. We're also making the encoding software available to our clients directly, so they don't have to use an encoding vendor. So anybody who's really who's urgently trying to start doing that encoding can do it in-house.
We've seen that many other players are coming and disrupting the linear TV market, like YouTube, Justin TV, and many others. How do you include these players within the measurement issues that might provide us?
That's a good question. So the question is, we're observing lots of disruption within the lots of companies are trying to disrupt the traditional linear TV model. Example being YouTube, and so that comes back to the challenge of trying to measure cross-platform on all those different layers. And so what we're doing is to ensure that if advertising is available or media is available on those new platforms, that we can properly reflect that measurement in one of our services that can be compared. And so YouTube is an interesting example because they are, the classic form of dynamically supported digital video streaming. And so they don't follow any of the rules of television in terms of the ability to broadcast within particular times and the time shifting and things like that. And so they are included inside our digital program ratings and our online campaign ratings products to be able to be compared with television. So at the end of the day, because the way that consumers consume the linear video versus a YouTube video is different, we have to reflect that in the numbers, but we can come up with an ad number, for example, which you can say, hey, the TV ads reached XX million people, the YouTube ads reached YY million people, and I can make a decision about whether it was cost effective to be able to choose between one or the other. All right, any other questions? All right, if not, thank you everybody.